Today we have a crazy entitled parent story of a mom hiding the father's death from their own kid. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, my mom is angry she potentially won't own a house in a different country. So for starters, my mom is spoiled, like mega spoiled. Everything has to be about her. Everything has to please her, etc. She has some moments where she's kind, but it's pretty rare. For starters, she does almost no housework, so your first thought would be, maybe she's the breadwinner. Nope, my dad makes more than 3 times the amount she makes. Another thing is that she demands to be pampered and basically worshipped for literally no reason at all. Now, for the story, my dad's side of the family has a property in China. We live in the US, and she wants partial ownership so she can sell it or something, which she does not need. My dad said that we likely won't own very much of the property, likely a couple plots of land, which ticked her off. The argument escalated into her throwing a cup and a plate on the ground and forcing my dad to clean it up as she stormed into her room. Please tell me how to freaking humble her. Edit, feel free to roast her. Second edit, for those who said they should divorce, I've asked my dad many times, but divorcing in China is a big taboo. And my dad said, I have 2 kids, how can I divorce? Although my sister is 22 and out of the house, I may be 16, but I'm mostly independent, so that part of the argument kinda falls flat. Honestly, I feel like maybe the best way to deal with this is not to try to humble them or antagonize them, but more so kind of just operate in a way where it seems to not affect you. I mean, definitely enforce your boundaries, keep your ground, but when they kind of start having toddler tantrums and acting out and stuff, don't feed into that and let them feel like their reactions or their acting out is in any way motivating you to do anything you wouldn't normally do. Canuck wrote, your best approach is to regard her like she's a missing part of her brain and be a much more mature and responsible person. If she has a modicum of self-awareness, she'll notice it and feel ashamed. Minflick added, nah, she won't and won't care, but I do believe that treating her like she's missing something, has a broken brain, helps us deal with these parents. A little bit of compassion and understanding, not acceptance, helps us feel better and not get so caught up in trying to get them to freaking behave. They can't. No use trying. Write them off. Helps us handle it internally. Having that understanding helped me with my mother, but it took me until I was in my 50s before the realization struck me. After that, I thought of her as an overage and virulent toddler, and her horribleness just mattered a lot less to me, and I was therefore less frustrated and upset. I argued less and orchestrated a calmer environment, which was easier for me as it kept her from spouting off so much entitlement and rage. As always, your mileage may vary. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of entitled parents, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is, Entitled Father says, I'm playing victim because I don't want to live in the state as him at all times. This is a recent and more short story. I, 18-year-old female, and my father, 44 to 45-ish male, do not have a great relationship. I grew up in a very abusive household. I'm currently working on leaving, but my dad knows I'm very distant with him. Typically, we do not get along, but today he was being nicer than usual, so we were talking casually. Somehow, retiring and beaches got brought up. My father happens to be obsessed with the ocean and beaches. He's told me that he would love to retire on one, so I asked him, don't you plan to retire on a beach? He said if I can, but I don't know how possible that is. I do intend to move, but if I do, I'll take you with me, of course. I asked, where do you plan to go? He said, I don't know, somewhere hot. I say, I'd love to be somewhere cold. Now, saying I like the cold was a mistake. He immediately starts ranting about how he hates the cold, how surely I don't, how I would change my mind if I lived on a beach, how while places like Puerto Rico is hot, Hawaii is a nice temperature. Just warm enough and has beaches everywhere. It's just too expensive. I just calmly say, I don't like the heat or beaches. I prefer the cold. This was my second mistake. Eventually we got to the car and the topic changed until he eventually asks me, do you plan to stay here or move? I said no, I'd like to move somewhere else that's cold. He asked me why. I said I don't like it here. And he said why? So I started naming a bunch of different reasons. Eventually I make my third and final mistake and lightly mention part of the reason I want to move is because everything here reminds me of my brother. My brother is a heavy drug user who's in and out of jail, and when he lived with me and my father, he used to heavily physically harm me. And if I said anything, I was punished for snitching. He starts going on a full rant about how I'm playing victim, how if everyone felt sorry for themselves like I did, no one would have a job. I go to work more than he does, and that I just want everyone to feel bad for me. How where I live isn't a bad place. It's rapid with drug abuse and crime. It's just cheap and conservative leaning, so he likes it for those reasons. He started going on and on about how I'm lazy and I want everyone to feel sorry for me, and how I didn't even really experience the worst of my brother, and how I just want to be special, and how he has real trauma from my brother unlike me. For context, I have had many different medical professionals confirm I have PTSD. Ever since he learned this, he's been trying to one-up my trauma, even lies about being diagnosed with PTSD so he can pretend he has the authority on what PTSD is. He was never diagnosed, he refuses to even see a mental health professional, and thinks they're all a government conspiracy. I wouldn't be shocked if he has it, but my issue is with the fact that he lies to feel better than me. I'm sure he said some stuff about how ugly my body is and how I'm a shallow person who just wants everyone to pity me and buy me things too. But sadly, this is just the average day near my dad. Hope someone finds my story funny. So, to be honest, I don't know who hearing this story would go, "Oh yeah, that's hilarious." I think the only way this begins to get funny is in a sad way if OP continues to put up with their entitled father's behavior. I just hope OP can end up somewhere where not only do they enjoy the weather, but they enjoy their surroundings and the people around them too. Hero or Devil 8 wrote, "Oh, I'm sorry, sweetie, your dad is a turd. Now you know that when the time comes to leave, you don't say anything until the last minute, and also don't tell him anything else about where you desire to live. Let him monologue and try not to let him bait you into his rants. I think he intentionally made mention of him taking you with him to get a rise out of you if he knows you plan on moving out. Let him be upset about it." My mom acted similarly. Although while living with her, she used to always compare us to her moving out around our age at the time and call us lazy, and was mad when I moved out and furious when my older sibling moved out of state without her permission. They were in their 30s. This next story is entitled "Grandma Hits Me with a Baby Stroller During a Graduation Ceremony." This post is going to be lighthearted relatively, but during the moment, I was close to a meltdown. First things first, I'm an autistic 20-year-old. I'm pretty sensitive to loud sounds in large groups, which is exactly what a commencement ceremony is, unfortunately. I was there for my sister though, and I don't regret it. I do wish I brought headphones or something though. The guests at the ceremony were made to sit on plastic bleachers in a large gym with barely any legroom or space for moving, especially once the benches filled up. I also am very particular about personal space. Probably because of said autism. Before entitled Grandma even sat down next to me, I was starting to have a hard time with the environment, so I went quiet and tried to focus on playing games on my phone. I was there with my parents and Grandma, and I was sitting with an open seat next to me. Entitled Grandma walks over some seats to get to the spot next to me and calls her family on the phone to tell them where she was. I was already worried that more people were coming, but I had no negative vibes from her specifically. Her family shows up about 5 to 10 minutes later, a group of like 6 people, including a really upset infant. I'm personally not a fan of children in general, but screaming ones take my anxiety and overstimulation to a whole new level. Thankfully for me and everyone around them, the baby quiets down pretty quickly and doesn't cry for the rest of the ceremony. What a polite little baby. When the baby showed up, entitled Grandma unfolded a whole baby stroller and rolled it right next to her in the decking/foot area of the bleachers. The stroller's handle was a few inches from my face, and I obviously noticed it, but didn't confront her about it. I don't like making any scenes, even if the outcome could be positive. She put the baby in the stroller and started rolling it back and forth in the free space between me and her, which means the stroller's handle was literally centimeters from my face every few seconds. I still said nothing and just focused on my phone. It played out for a while like this as I tried to block it out. I texted complaints to my friends and sent a selfie of me in the stroller handle right by my face. I was starting to calm down as she moved the baby to other family members, but when the baby came back to her, she missed putting him in the stroller and it came rolling and smacked my whole body and my face. Entitled Grandma did apologize, but I silently pushed the stroller back as far as I could to her and made a "it's fine" hand motion, trying not to leave the whole ceremony in general. Despite this, she continued rocking the baby in the stroller and it got even closer to me. Intervals of her pushing the stroller into my face and me inching the stroller back when the baby was elsewhere and she was distracted happened over the next hour. Right as the ceremony was ending, my own grandma on the other side of me noticed I was silent and basically crunching myself as far away from the stroller as I could. She confronted entitled grandma and kept saying to her, "You're getting too close," while pushing the stroller back to her. Entitled grandma was not receptive to this advice and kept shaking her head no and arguing with my grandma. I tried to block it all out as I was between the two of them covering my ears and looking down, so I don't remember too much verbatim. Eventually they stopped and we left immediately because I was close to a meltdown. Entitled grandma and her family walked by us as we left and she said absolutely nothing. Frankly, I'll be glad to never see her again. I do feel guilty for not asking her to stop myself and then having my grandma argue with her, but I wasn't in the headspace or had the mental capacity to engage in any conversation. Thanks for reading. Considering everything OP deals with, it's not like a surprise that they didn't speak up for themselves. And really, I don't think you can fault them in any real way. I mean, obviously, the real offender here is the person who has no concept of personal space for other people. It's one thing for entitled Karens, but when you get to the point of entitled grandma and you still just don't care about the person sitting next to you in their personal space, shoving that stroller handle in their face over and over, it kind of gets you riled up because you think, what if OP did speak up for themselves and say something? That entitled grandma's just going to reply with something that's, again, completely inconsiderate like, "Well, I have to look after the baby, that's all the space there is." Minflick wrote, "Graduation ceremonies are chaos incarnate. I can't imagine going to one as a person fairly easily triggered by loud and crowd. Holy moly. People just behave so poorly while they're there. You'd think their student was the only student on the planet." It sounds like OP did pretty well though. Not happy, but managed to avoid a meltdown despite the potential. Luckily, or hopefully, they don't happen all that often, so OP will be able to wait a good long time before the next one. I was really grateful my kids' high school graduations all happen on the local rodeo grounds due to no place to have them at the school. Individual seats, and you could only get so close to somebody. They weren't bench seats where somebody could encroach too much on you. Fun fact for us, I told all the relatives that it might be closing in on 90 degrees Fahrenheit in their city, but at the rodeo grounds, it was not, and the evening fog would roll in with a breeze and it would be in the low 50s and 40s, so layer up and bring good jackets and blankets. Nobody believed me, so it was a good thing I brought every blanket we had in the house. Our next story is, I feel defeated and stuck. I want my parents to move out. My parents have been irresponsible my whole life. I've been homeless and in many uncomfortable housing situations, including living with extended family, homeless shelters, cars, or squatted housing, on and off throughout my childhood. During my senior year of high school, I lived in a motel. I turned 18 in late 2021 during the pandemic, while my parents and two of my siblings lived in the motel. I was in my first semester of college and had to return to the motel due to financial struggle. During that time, my dad told us that the weekly rent owed to the motel was paid through a COVID rental assistance program. However, they would spend their money on gambling, weed, and alcohol and never buy food, causing us to lose a lot of weight. Two of us were in college, and they would take the relief money we received and spend it too. Then they would criticize us for not having jobs, even though my mom didn't have a job either, and one of my siblings had to quit theirs because my parents would take their money while they were sleeping, and it got to a point where they couldn't afford transportation to the job. On top of that, I had no birth certificate or social security card because they lost it when I was like 5 and never replaced it, so I couldn't get a job until I got them. It took months, but my siblings and I figured out how to receive my documents and got jobs to save up to move away from our parents because their irresponsible ways were keeping us trapped in the motel with them. It was really hard to save and keep money from our parents. At first, my dad would tell me how he made more money than me and that my money from my near minimum wage job meant nothing, letting me know constantly that on a bad week, he made twice as much as me. Then he and my mom would ask for money. They would get mad when we asked them why or said no. It was hard with them taking our money, but after 5 months of working, we had enough money to start looking for a place. We decided not to rush, since we also wanted money to save for a car. We told our parents we were looking for a place, and they said that they would also look for themselves. While still touring houses, we were given an eviction notice, and it turned out my dad had been lying about paying rent. We had no clue because he did say the COVID program was over and would ask us for money to cover it. My siblings and I decided to just move into any place we could. We got accepted for a 3-bedroom house for a good price in today's economy, and we had our move-in day set just before the eviction date. Just before we moved in, my dad asked if he and my mom could move in with us for just a year and said that he would even pay half of the rent, and we could split the other half 3 ways. We didn't think he would actually do that, but we agreed because we felt bad and didn't want them to be homeless, and we figured we could use their car some more. I ended up getting a new car the same week we moved, and then my parents' car needed some work, so we ended up splitting the rent 4 ways. Me, 2 siblings, and dad. Then he crashed his car and never got it fixed because he had no insurance. After that, it continued to get worse. My mom would take my car, lie about where she's going, and not bring it back in time for us to go to work. My dad yells at me for asking for the money in weekly increments, but never has it all at the end or beginning of the month. They refuse to put money in the grocery pile, but always eat the groceries. They will take things from my room without asking. They never put gas in my car after using it. They argue constantly. I was taking classes at a local community college, but had to stop because I had to work more hours to cover for all the things that they do and don't pay for. This is just a small list of all the things they do that affect me. My siblings and I want to stay in this house because the rent is so affordable, and its location is extremely convenient for its distance from shopping, recreation, and my job. I can work 25 hours a week and go to school while living comfortably. How do I get them to move out? Or do I just accept that my siblings and I will have to move and leave them homeless? I mean, realistically, the problem here is it sounds like OP wants to evict them, but also doesn't really want to look them in the eye and say, get out in 30 days or whatever. The sooner you rip that band-aid off and say, listen, I'm gonna need you to just get out of here in 30 days, I'm sorry, figure it out, and you stick to that, the sooner it's actually going to happen. Sunrise Misty wrote, evict their lazy deadbeat butts. Get an eviction notice from the police and you don't owe them anything. Also lock down your credit and hide important documents from them. They made their bed, they can lie in it. Agent Lady Hawkeye added, yup, time to evict them. OP, you can love your parents, but you and your siblings need to set and enforce some boundaries now. It was their job to protect and provide for you, and they actively didn't do that. Now it's your responsibility to protect and provide for yourselves, and the next step is removing your parents' access to your resources. This next story is, my parents gaslit me out of $50,000+ when I was 20. I work with my family business, not like I joined my father's established business, but we created it with my brother and parents when I was 18. Now, around 14 years ago, we were working in the coal mines in Queensland, Australia, and we did small jobs for the mine like drive machinery off-site for sales or maintenance, etc. And I drove a machine off that was old but well cared for. It was only being sold because it was very old. I found out that the machine was going up for auction the next day and told my father about it, how good it was, and he had a friend bid on it for us. The plan was that we would go 3 ways. One me, one my brother, and one my parents, and my brother and I would get to be part owners of a machine. We won the bid and I think I was told to pay $35,000 for my share, and I did. Funny enough, the mine site we were on had a contractor working there that needed this type of machine, and a week later, the same machine was back in the same place working again. My brother and I were told we would get 1/3 of the rental for the machine, and we were not great with keeping track of our finances. So we just went on with life assuming it was being taken care of by my parents. 3 months or so go by with the machine working nearly every day, earning I think around $100 an hour. And the guy we were renting it to tells us that he'll need this machine for the foreseeable future. So he wants to buy it for more than we purchased it for. Done deal. Everyone is happy and the sale goes through, and we're told that it will take some time for my brother and I to see our share, plus the profit from the rent, and time goes on. I asked about it 6 months later, and my parents told us that we'd been paid our share. I said I didn't think so, but they assured us we had. More time goes on, and when I ask again, then the money was used for taxes, or they needed some for this or that. Fast forward 12 years later, and my parents buy a very expensive house using the family business assets as collateral without talking to me. They start saying it's our house. I said it's not mine because I didn't put any money into it, but my brother did, around $80,000 I think, and my parents said, "Oh, we put your share of that old machine sale in." Suddenly, they now knew where the money was. Apparently, they just decided to keep my money and my brother's money as a sort of cushion because we didn't need it. We didn't have any dependents and weren't married. I am now, so they needed it more. Suffice to say, I keep my money separate now and I don't lend them anything. I know I should be more outraged, but families are complicated. And I'm pretty sure I got a bit of brainwashing or something to get over. They've done a lot of crappy things to us over the years, but it's only obvious when looking back. I think, honestly, in a large majority of people, having something like this happen to you may be a permanent relation breaker. To most people, $50,000 is a lot of money. Granted, not only that, but people probably wouldn't go 6 months with just letting them say, "Oh, it's coming," or "Oh, taxes," or whatever. I don't care how good or bad the IRS is, they're not charging you $50,000 for taxes for selling a machine. Tuna Tofu wrote, "I've read posts from many folks who work for family as employees, but they never quite get paid, or at least not paid what they're owed. If minimum wage is $15 an hour, why should a family member only get $9? Where's my paycheck? Why do you even need it? You don't have kids," or some other bogus excuse. Never ever do business with family. No, not all money made or had by the family members is ours. Yours is yours. And never lend money to anybody if they're not good credit risks. You basically don't trust them. They are obviously unable or unwilling to pay you back, or you just plain don't want to. Our next story is, my parents criticized me for graduating from college too late. I'm 28 years old and I graduated from college yesterday, and I was very happy. I graduated so late because I'd started to study medicine when I was 18 years old with a very high grade point average in high school. But I started to suffer from very strong anxiety problems and had to drop out, which also led to depression. Finally, after going through a life crisis and not knowing what to do, I did 2 years of professional training and then started nursing school. But in the middle, I got depressed again, and it took me another year to graduate. Nursing is a university degree in my country. My parents apparently celebrated my graduation with me, but then I heard them secretly criticizing me, saying that it took me 10 years to graduate, that it was a lot of years, that I lost 3 years in medicine, then I did the vocational training and now it took me many years in nursing, saying that I almost didn't graduate. They also said that before I had nothing, but now at least I have something. They spoke about me in a derogatory tone as if I was a failure. I burst into tears and it hurt me deeply, especially because my mother went so far as to call me a failure when I left medicine, and they only cared about my academic achievements and never even acknowledged that I had depression or asked me how I was doing. I don't know if I'm overreacting, but it's not the first time they've had this attitude. On top of that, when I confronted them, they denied everything and changed their story, saying that they had done nothing wrong and that they were glad it was over, which made me doubt my own perception. I feel like if OP's done any serious work on trying to deal with things like depression, they especially should understand you should never be living your life specifically for the satisfaction of your parents. At least now, OP knows their true colors and how they truly feel. 100%, a million %, I know it hurts. I would be devastated if I were in OP's shoes, but at least now OP knows they can pivot and they can stop worrying about trying to get some kind of approval or satisfaction from them. Live a life that makes you happy, not your parents happy. And also, there's nothing wrong with any kind of secondary education being finished at 28. LOD616 wrote, "Firstly, life is a marathon, not a sprint. Everyone gets to their certain points in life at different times, and that's fine. There are plenty of people that decide to become doctors or lawyers in their 40s, as it was what they wanted to do at that time for themselves. Regarding your parents, you should confront them again. Tell them you know what they said. You gave a lot of detail, so even if it isn't all completely accurate, it's too much to not have truth behind it. And tell them it took you a long time to get here, but you were struggling and maybe you would have been quicker if they actually supported you mentally. They just left you struggling alone." Long History 6082 said, "Having grown up with a parent who tore me down like this, I can tell you confronting them is not likely to resolve anything. You just need to accept that they're not likely ever going to celebrate you, and they're not going to be a mirror to who you actually are. Their view of you will not be true, and it won't be kind. I would talk with a trusted therapist about this relationship and consider if it's one that adds to your life or if it's one that doesn't belong anymore. Our next story is, my mom hid the death of my father to me because of inheritance. My father, an alcoholic, absentee, abusive, and violent man, died in November at his mother's house. The body was found in January, probably due to an alcohol-induced coma. My mother, my father's ex-wife for 15 years, and my brother cremated him and blocked all contact with me to hide my father's death for 6 months, even knowing that I was asking since November because he went missing. I found out yesterday through a lawyer paid by my mother. My mother's plan was to prevent me from knowing my father had died so that I wouldn't claim the inheritance of 25% of the house. My mother has 50% and my brother another 25%, allowing her and my brother to keep it. However, this month they received a debt along with the inheritance of 10,000 euros, so they were forced to inform me through third parties. For more details, my mother was a narcissist and abused me physically and mentally. I left home at 16 and fled the country to escape them. She controls my brother, who at 28 has the mental age of a 10-year-old. The lawyer tried to manipulate me into accepting the debt and the inheritance, arguing that a mother is a mother and that it's their current residence. A residence where they don't even let me in to get my things. If I refuse the inheritance, my mother will eventually win and keep the other half of the apartment, which is valued at 80,000 euros the whole flat. My idea was to force them to sell the house and pay the debt with that, but the lawyer says that that would be inhumane. And living without parents because they're bad people, what is that? That my life is doomed with many mental problems because of them? Anyway, what do you think of this case? It's in Spain. I currently live in Germany. I'm super lost. Thanks. Edit, thank you all very much for all the comments. First of all, I want to clarify a few points. My mother owns 50% of the property because the apartment is in her name and my father's. The lawyers also try to manipulate me into letting her handle the case from my side too. And when I told her I would go with another lawyer, she said it wouldn't be a good idea. Another point I want to ask is, would it be difficult for me to try to sell my 25% of the property? My mother and brother together would have 75% and have been living there for 21 years up to this day, which would make the process more difficult for me, wouldn't it? And I have 3 options. Accept the debt and own 25% of the apartment where my mother and brother live, but I haven't been able to retrieve my personal belongings from there for ages. Accept the debt and the inheritance and have the debt paid off with the inheritance, which I don't know how that could be possible since my mother and brother are still living there and I don't think they'll buy my share. Decline everything and leave them the debt and the 25% of the apartment. Thank you very much, truly. Now, I definitely do not know how it works in Spain, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and assume that if OP, as far as the inheritance goes, is legally owed 25% of that apartment, usually in situations like that, you can either force a sale of the house or they can buy you out. And there's not like a, nah, I don't think we want to buy your 25%. There's either a, we literally have to sell the house or you buy me out. All I can say is find a really good lawyer and best of luck. Chocolate Candy Bar wrote, contact another lawyer as soon as possible, then force the sale of the house. Pay the debt and keep the rest. Don't let a sexist manipulator dictate the way you act. Edited to add, if your mom is his ex-wife, she may not be entitled to anything. If she wants to keep the house, she can buy your share. It's simple. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy entitled parent story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That's it, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.